Hi there. Welcome to the Lean Into Art cast, a show where a few visual storytellers get together and engage with different kinds, sort of tease out different kinds of visual storytelling topics, making stuff, the lifestyle of people who make stuff, the kind of meta challenges that come around a lifestyle of making stuff. We think hard about visual storytelling, so you will too. My name is Jersey Droz. I'm a cartoonist and I'm a teaching artist, and the other host is
Hey, I am Rob Stenzinger. I am a user experience and game designer.
a user experience and game designer and a cartoonist in a podcast. What? What is that?
I This is a weird box of stuff. We should send it back. I don't know. Did you order this?
Who knew that disciplines can cross over with one another? Surely there must be something wrong. Hey Rob, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. Doing I'm what I think I'll just mention it since
Yeah, I think you
feeling the
should come
leading
out
question.
and admit it to the
Um
audience.
I'm 8 days on greatly reduced caffeine. So, I don't know. I've been told I can have a mellow demeanor, and I don't know what'll happen now.
Time is going to stop.
I might cause a time error somehow.
Rob is going to actually get so mellow he's going to cause local time dilation where he feels like everything's happening normally, but by the time he stops talking, we're all 300 years older.
Like, where'd everybody go? This doesn't say Google anymore. Like,
This doesn't say.
Robotron Hangouts. All right.
Oh, oh, but what, caffeine? No caffeine. Wow,
Well, greatly reduced. Yeah. A couple of
that's
green teas as opposed to like approximately 6 coffees.
like that's like one of my last really big vices is a lot of caffeine, a lot of coffee.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. And I don't think we've ever talked about that as a topic, have we?
No, we have not.
We've done self care episodes, but not like food. I don't think.
Mm. Yeah, true. But yeah, this is an experiment. It's a time of year where I tend to take on those kind of challenges, and it's been going well. Like I said, 8 days so far, and this is just my quirky thing that I do where I'm like, well, that sounds like a good challenge, so yeah, why not?
We are entering the season of challenges. It occurred to me the other day that Inktober is coming, right around the corner. You know,
Hmm.
uh, roughly speaking. Right after that is Art Sound Off.
Hmm.
And these are art challenges with different kinds of constraints to get you motivated to engage with something, like give you a starting point to engage with something. Um, and I've been having some interesting thoughts about what I'm going to do for my Inktober challenge this year, um, but I'm trying to find a clumsy way to segue into what this week's topic is about. This idea of the influence of constraints and how constraints influence the things that we make, right? And we've talked about this in the past about, and I know this is like an old saying that I like to trot out all the time in my classroom is that limitations breed creativity. If you walk up to somebody and say, tell me a story, they're gonna go, But if you say, tell me a story about your 7th birthday, suddenly you've got like a beginning point. You've got a place to jump off of. And that limitation, which could feel like it confines you, suddenly liberates you to explore a lot of dimensions of that one day, right?
Mm.
But this is not talking about necessarily storytelling limitations. We're talking about a different kind of limitation, right, Rob?
Yeah, I think it can be with unforeseen consequences on a project where you've chosen some constraints, and of course those were likely well serving and well met at some point in time, and you got going on a project, you get a project, maybe even fully produced, but then there's this other side effects
Mm.
that can pop up.
This wasn't
And
inspired by any chance by last week's extra lean that we recorded for the Patreon
it
supporters, was it?
it totally was. Actually, I was doing a little bit of reflection on my own after that, and I thought, wait a minute, this is a full on topic. We need to visit this
Yeah, because we both
because
have are very far along on a couple of personal projects, and we both run into snags with final implementation, right? And due to some choices we made early on about format, structure, approach, and delivery, and so on.
Totally. And so now there's like this new, a new crossroads set of decisions and trade-offs. So what do you do? Uh, I don't know. Maybe that's what the movie Speed was all about, right?
God.
What do you do, punk? What do you do? Hot shot. That's right. What do you do, hot shot?
Hot shot. Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
anyway. Yep.
And you know what? I would say it's like like if we're an overview section. Most of the time, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with running into those friction points because it usually results in me kind of going back and reinvestigating the initial idea and finding a more interesting solution. But I'm betting we both have examples where it didn't net any positive results either, which we'll probably talk about in the 10,000 feet up section.
Yeah, I imagine. I mean, so like these roadblocks, I mean, maybe there's a workaround and you can sort of look back and appreciate how you learned, but like it's sometimes a roadblock just is a roadblock and
And
not that
sometimes the
rewarding.
roadblock is a detour saying like, no, you thought you wanted to make this, but really what you need to make is that. And you're like, oh, I'm so glad I ran into that,
Yeah, quite true. So what do you think?
I'm ready to hit it. You want me to
Done
hit the
some intro?
music?
Let's dig into this.
All right. How about we just start out super intense?
Oh,
Get into
appropriate.
it.
Always
This is
appropriate.
This
Goes
is a
with
deference.
anything.
This is a deference to your lower caffeine levels. All right, so we're on the ground, which is to say, like the section where we talk about actual, hands-on approach to the topic. Well, what does it look like when we've engaged with this thing, and then we'll go back and get 10,000 feet up and maybe talk a little bit about the philosophical aspects or abstract aspects of this thing. So, how about comparing and contrasting some situations where the platform or the tools that we chose have led to unforeseen influence on the work? You want to go first, Rob?
Okay. Uh Guitar Fretter. Guitar Fretter is a game I made a few years back. I've updated it a few times, not quite once a year, almost like, 0.75 times a year or so. And it's something that I built in using this thing called the Corona SDK, which is sort of an environment that lets me express code and put in images and sounds to and mush them together and make a game. And and it turns out that they make it pretty easy to get that game onto iOS, and well, whether that's iPhone or iPad, and then also on Android with both phones and tablets. And now they've expanded to other platforms, even where Mac desktop and Linux, or Mac and Windows desktop. So kind of interesting. And however, okay, so I build this game using the Corona SDK, and I get it out in the app stores, and it has a fine life for I think like 7 years now. And well, this is a funny constraint. So that platform is something I could have chosen other things to do that. I could have chosen to go native, to say like, I'm going to build this in Java for Android. I'm going to build this in Objective C for iOS, right? But this platform had this amazing thing where express your game with one set of files, just a little bit of extra configuration, a little bit of extra icons, and hey, guess what? Same code, different platforms, runs great. I mean, that was a very promising thing for me, and where I was like, this looks fantastic. I just need to get a little bit more comfortable with Lua as the programming language. A quirky thing, but totally learnable and no big deal. So it fulfills its promise. Years pass, and then I get this surprise, right? This is the whole, like, there are trade-offs when it's like, I built on this platform. It would have been hard to do a lot of things that felt like native application specific, right? Like if I made a form or a lot of, if I made a lot of a configuration page, like preferences or whatever, it wouldn't necessarily look like it belonged on Android or belonged on iOS. I was cool with that because it's a game, right? I'm like, yeah, no big deal. All this stuff like points to this is perfect for me to make a game. But hidden what was this trade-off of they chose to put things into their platform that Google Play decided this isn't okay, right? So it was inert. I wasn't using this set of technology in the app. It just was like it's like having tools in your toolbox you're not touching, right? They're there, but you just kind of carry them along with you, whatever. No harm. But it was something to do with like an ad and analytics something, right?
Oh, so it's tracking
Yeah.
user activity.
So it could, right?
All right.
And it went against the platform policy eventually, not right away, but
Mm-hmm.
eventually it did. And so here's where like my constraints, like so maybe like I'm also to blame in this situation because what this all led to is that Guitar Fretter got booted out of the Google Play App Store, right?
Mm.
Super not proud of that, and uh, it's in part the surprise constraints of the tool that I chose, and that my constraints how I chose to like set myself up with this project, right? Hey, if I make sure I put in like 2 hours a month, 5 hours a month, and to make sure that even if I'm not doing a new version, it's like this health check. Hey, is everything okay? Is there something, whatever? Hey, this email from Google that I didn't really fully read until way many months later, right? Oh crap, that's what that is. Let me let me look into this. And so I did, and I went back in and I updated it. I researched to try to have some sign that like, is it worth it to like rebuild with the Corona SDK? And will I be able to get back in? It seems that some other game creators have had success with that, at least on forums. However, it's I don't know. I haven't verified that, nor that didn't work out for me because I've gone back and did the work and got it, resubmitted and cleared through all the hoops and the issues until the final one of like, hey, but oh, by the way, you're still not welcome back.
Mm.
So, because I kind of thought that that door would have unlocked after resolving all the issues, but I don't know. And this is where I'm a little suspicious. Like I would have to, I need to invest even more time to dig into this to see like where's the real problem. Did Corona really remove that or not? I don't know. Or is it just that I'm super locked out, not just kind of locked out? I don't know.
Mm.
And so I could rename it. I could rename Guitar Fretter into something else. I could basically go back in the App Store and forget all the history of all the reviews and stuff, which there's a lot of good, really kind reviews on Guitar Fretter. It has a pretty good rating. But yeah, so there's that. It's an unresolved puzzle now. And that um, definitely represents a surprise constraint to me. Um, in two levels, right? I'm owning the fact that I did not continue to tend and nurture the game, right? I
Sure.
have taken long breaks from it, and in one of those long breaks, an issue popped up, right? But
Right.
also, the issue popped up because something crappy was put inside there by
Uh,
the SDK.
So, I mean, this is like a maybe we'll talk more about this in 10,000 feet up, but this is like so I use that initial analogy or story of like if I say, tell me a story about your seventh birthday party, you've got a starting point, but there's a trade off there. There's a trade off in that. Well, now you can't talk about, or it's a harder leap to start talking about your divorce, right? When I say start with your seventh birthday party, right?
Yeah,
It it's or like or depending on what kind of birthday party you had when you were seven, like maybe there's some baggage in there, but anyway, there's trade offs that come with any starting point. And it sounds like with the case of Corona SDK, it's like, yeah, it had these affordances to give you an easy on ramp to be able to get it onto multiple platforms, but you aren't necessarily aware of everything that's happening while you're making something, right? Or if you are, things that seem benign can suddenly become less benign through policy changes of platforms that you host. But that's the platform limitation too, right? Uh, this comes up a lot with like hosting comics hosting sites, right? Like whether it's Keen Space or Keen Spot from the old days, or if it's Hipastic, or if it's Line Webtoon, or if it's Tumblr, or if it's whatever, their terms of service can change.
Mm.
And suddenly if they decide that, like, for whatever reason, they decide that your thing is no longer acceptable content, out you go, right?
Yeah. Or if there's just something about your project that doesn't fit how that platform continues to get tended to, right?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, this is good stuff to dig into, but I'm super curious about your on the ground example, like
Yeah.
or
So an on the
both.
ground example, and this is I'll start with like a successful one, and we'll see where it goes. One where I was happy. I was frustrated. I was very frustrated, and I had like a couple weeks going like, ugh, how am I going to solve this problem? And I was chronicling this all on my Patreon too, by the way, if anybody's really curious and want to see all this stuff, but I'll share a little bit of it. So last year, I finished a comic for Inktober for my comic Boulder and Fleet called A Friendly Game. And here we are almost a year later, and I'm finally getting around to printing the darn thing. Uh, and it came time to work on the cover for the book. So the first problem to solve is like, what's the cover going to look like? Did a whole bunch of different designs. Finally, pulled some of my Patreon supporters, pulled some friends in my real life, and said, like, what's standing out to you? Got a design, great. Ann and I recently got a letterpress, an old timey press with like a lever, and it's got like rollers that roll on the ink. They roll on some ink, and then they roll the ink across up your typeface that you can set by hand. If you've been following me on Instagram, you've seen some of my experiments with this. I've been doing a lot of typesetting lately, learning how to use a letterpress. And it takes your paper, and the rollers go over the letters like so, and then the paper gets pressed onto the letters, and it pulls off, and then you've got a print, right? So we got this letterpress, and Anne starts telling me that you can do very very high resolution images. You can get them engraved into like copper and magnesium, and you can use it as a plate. And as some of you may know, I mean, for years I've been making Boulder and Fleet mini comics that I screen print the covers, and I'm
Mhm.
holding one up on the screen right now for those who are just listening. And what I love about it is it creates like this nice textured feel. Rob, you know what I'm talking about. It's like you feel like this nice high quality paper, but then there's like this tactile thing that happens with the silk screen ink, right?
Oh, it's a beautiful touch, it pops out visually and then tactile where you when you pick it up,
Yeah, I
it
love,
really stands out.
and it makes a mini comic feel like an art object, which I really like.
Mhm.
Well, the problem is that you can only get so high definition with a silk screen. Like, you can only get like so much detail. And that I ran into that with the Pickles and Taft comic, which I'm holding up to the screen. We'll see how
Mhm.
good it shows up. But like
Yeah.
I there was more detail on this initially, and then when I tried to burn the screen, it was like, nope, not all that detail is making it in there. And it was a really high resolution screen I was using, so I had to like dial it back. Well, when it came time to do the cover for a friendly game, and we got this letterpress, and Ann says, "Oh, you can do a much higher resolution image." I'm like, "Cool." So I come up with this design, and it was originally intended to be a two color. So like this plant monster we see would be filled with one color, and then our heroes would just be rendered in line art, and I would use like maybe a lighter color paper. So it'd be like a two pass. I'd get two plates made, one for the background color, one for the foreground color. Um, well, as it turns out, because I decided to do a wraparound cover, I created a cover that's too big for the press that we have. Our press is 5 by 8 to print on a mini comic size. Like, for instance, if I were to open up a mini comic like this, we're talking, oh, I should say 5 inches by 8 inches, I should say. And so this cover opened up is 8.5 inches wide. Oh no, this is five and what is this? This is like this is 5.5, right? By 8.5.
Mm.
Yeah, that's right. So it's 5.5 by 8.5. So I'm a half inch shy on each side, which means, okay, well, and I talked to some different people, and I'm like, well, what do you think I should do? And they're like, well, just make the cover smaller and have more negative space. I'm like, oh, no, I don't want it to look like that. I want it to look like what I want it to look like. So I scratched my head about this for a long time. What am I going to do? My chase or my letterpress won't fit it. I really like this design. I don't want to throw away the wraparound because like that was another option. It was like, let's just not do a wraparound. But if you look at it and you see it opened up, it's like it's really cool, right? Like you see the monster about to get the heroes in the cover, and then you look around the back cover and you see, oh, there's a lot more to this monster, right? And there's poor Maggie being strangled by the monster at the top of the back cover. So after puzzling and puzzling, I was like, well, wait a second. Silkscreen can only give you so much resolution, but it's a good enough resolution for a color fill. And if I do now, I actually have here the transparencies, so I can show you. So what if I did a color fill of the background color, then do a highlight color, and then the line art would be turned into the plate, and which makes it just small enough. It's just narrow enough and just short enough that it fits into our press. So I can print the high resolution line art, which gives me, I went from a 2-color print to a 3-color print because lining up 2 color fills would be relatively easy. And then lining up the line art over top on the letterpress is much simpler than doing it on my screen printing setup. I don't know if I explained that very well, but
I think you did. I mean, it sounds like um I do have a question that all right. So to my understanding is you have um the letterpress isn't big enough for your paper. So but yet you were able to turn that into something that works given switching jobs as far as like okay I guess screen printing could do a
so
different job than the letterpress, but then how
yeah.
does that work in the end if the letterpress is still not
So
to size for your
the letterpress
paper?
can fit the paper just fine. It's just it
Oh
can't print the plate that big. So if you look at the images I have on the screen, I'm going to zoom in on one of them so we can see. So the yellow that we see here with the Boulder and Fleet logo and the color fills and the characters, the yellow, that's
yeah.
screen printed. Then the light green that we see inside of the plant monster, that's screen printed. But then the line art, that dark green line art around the characters, if you look, none of that line art goes higher than Maggie, right? It stops at Maggie. So it's shorter than the actual page. Uh,
Yep.
and then also because the plant monster stops about a quarter inch before the edge of the page, it's narrower in width than the image. So the plate now fits in the press, but I can still have a cover that has a full bleed and max or takes advantage of the whole size of the paper, right?
That's awesome. Okay. Great. Have you done a test yet?
Actually, I'm doing a test of the letterpress plate next Wednesday. So
Oh,
I'm going to
cool.
letterpress lab at the Ann Arbor District Library, and I'm gonna, do a trial run of printing with that plate. Um, I haven't done the screen printing yet because I got to burn the screens. This transparency I was holding up a second ago. This is to burn my screens for doing the 2 colors underneath. So once I run
Mm.
the test next week, and man, there's so much in art that's all about testing, right? I'm testing on different materials, testing on different paper weights. I want to try on a 100-pound paper versus 60-pound paper. What's it going to look like if I print on paper with this much tooth versus that much tooth? Uh, so much little fussiness that goes into this thing. But once I got that test done, then it'll go on to okay. Well, now I'm going to screen print them, and I'll do probably like 300 2-color passes, maybe 500. I might do 500, and then because I'm only going to get maybe 70% of those are going to be any good, and
Mm.
then I'll do hopefully get like close to 80% letterpress finished. Like the final pass, which will bring me down to whatever, like 300 covers.
Wow. Okay. So the trade-offs seem like it seems like you addressed larger ones, but now there's a couple of fine-tuning ones that remain, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I addressed the design constraint of how do I get this really high resolution image printed on such a small space and printed in a way where I'm doing it by hand, right? Because I could send this to Kinko's if I really want to, or FedEx, whatever you want to call it now. I could send it to a local copy shop if I really wanted to. But I want this to be something that's done by hand with our old timey equipment. So there's that constraint. There's the constraint of I have this really dynamite image that I really want to be as high quality as possible, and I want to maintain as much fidelity as possible. Oh, also backing up. Um, I inked it originally by hand on paper, but realized after the fact that I used a lot of grayscale fills on it. Like I was using a lot of dry brush effect, which I didn't find out until after the fact can't translate to an engraved plate. Naturally, it couldn't. It needs to be a bitmapped image. It has to be 100% black, 100% white. So I re-inked it. I had to ink it twice. Inked it again in Clip Studio Paint with anti-aliasing completely off, so it was absolutely pure black and pure white. But then like Leaner Dijusan like messaged me privately when she saw what I went through, and she's like, "Oh, here's like some scan settings that really would have helped you out." And I'm like, "Oh, you're right, it did help me out. I wouldn't have had to do that." But that's part of the fun of the learning process is you make mistakes, helpful people come along, point you towards really useful resources, and you move forward. But anyway, yeah, it's been like a long learning process going through this experience, but it's one that I'm really grateful for because the next time is going to be even easier, and I'll know I have a wider set of options now as a result of that. And I think I'm going to have a better looking cover in the end than what I originally set out to have.
It almost sounds like, I mean, you've been crafting a new mini comic platform
Yeah.
in a way for you. Like you had your approach with the Pickles and Taft and Heroes for Hire, right?
Adventures for Hire.
Adventures for Hire. Yep. And so that platform, and then this is like a new version of that platform to
Yeah.
do other projects, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to allow me to explore different kinds of design um, configurations because I can do a combination of screen printing and letterpress now, and let them each do what they're good at. So, right. So, like in the case of Pickles and Taft, I could easily reprint this cover now with doing the background color with the screen printing, and then, or rather, do the yellow. The yellow fills would be screen printed, and then the green line art and smudge behind them would be done on the letterpress.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I would get a higher fidelity image, and it would still have that wonderful tactile feel. And then another benefit of the letterpress, and this is like one of those things where an old technology comes into fashion because of its what was considered its flaws, is that depending on the kind of paper you use and how much pressure you use, you've probably seen this on like when you get like a wedding invitation from people, because they're popular with making like custom wedding invitations. If it can leave an impression, like almost like an embossing on the paper. So when it presses the dye on there, and that's what I'm going to test out next Wednesday, is when it impresses the ink, it leaves a slight indentation in the paper, which adds to that kind of tactile experience of touching the printed object, you know?
Yeah, how awesome. And I don't know how annoying that has become less common, but I suppose it's been, yeah, it gives it a new life because it's special again as
Yeah.
well. So
Well, and from
trade-offs
what I
on that.
understand, in the old days when they were more widely in use, that was actually considered poor printing. Like, oh, you shouldn't have impression. It should just be like lightly glanced on the paper and it should feel perfectly smooth. So now this thing that was an idiosyncrasy and kind of a flaw becomes what makes it desirable now, because like you can't replicate that with other kinds of. You can't use an inkjet printer and get that effect, right? So
No. Nope, not that I've seen. I I imagine you could come up with a production process that sort of beat up your paper somehow, right? You do your printouts, you throw it in a box of BBs, right? Or little metal ball bearings. Shake it
yeah,
up. I don't know.
yeah.
Not the same though.
But yeah, so trade offs leading to different design choices lead to, because like you are, your experience with Guitar Fitter is leading you to try out a different technology, right?
Well, absolutely. And so one of the reasons I'm exploring Unity is based on my experience in working with other platforms. I still I have mixed feelings about things like the Chrome SDK. I have and also that this Panda Needs You isn't built in that. It's built using JavaScript and web technologies, but it's packaged with something called Cocoon or Cocoon.io, and that has some trade-offs and whatnot, and can reach some platforms yet not others, where Unity comes along, Unity 3D, and it can reach a wide variety, and honestly a mind-blowing variety of platforms. Like I could you know anyone can build a game in that and then have it be potentially able to reach like the Xbox One, Nintendo's systems like the Switch or the Wii U, and even like the 3DS, and of course desktops and Linux, Mac, Windows. on and on, and then mobile. I mean, it's the amount of platforms you can reach is is amazing. It's a
Wow.
huge strength, and how much that sort of packaging and all the idiosyncrasies of that building step of like, oh great, I've expressed my game, and then I get to play and test it, but now I've got to go somewhere. It needs to get deployed. That part has been nicely improved, I think, to create a very distinct, desirable quality that that Unity has. So hence I'm learning that as I'm working along with the existing technologies too, to do little updates and spread my current games to other platforms.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're both headed in hopeful directions despite some initial frustrations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what other choice is there? Because
Well, let's explore that in 10,000 feet up because,
okay,
yeah, I mean, does it always turn out for the best? Are we like Spock in Star Trek 6 that we must have faith that the universe will unfold as it should? Um, or are there instances where you're like, you have to just, oh, yay, get out of here, getting while the going's good. So,
sure. Sometimes abandoning ship might be the best the best outcome available. Yeah, sounds good. Let's chew on that after a little break.
all right, so we'll do that in just a minute and a half. But first, we have to thank some people who make this podcast possible, and those people happen to be the folks who support us on Patreon. What is Patreon? Well, think of it as a way to give a monthly vote for the show. You believe in us, you believe in the stuff that we do, and for as little as $1 a month, you can let us know that, help make the show more sustainable. Contribute, and if enough people contribute to the show, then it will indeed be sustainable. Our time will be paid for. And we want to thank 5 people who have been doing just that, who have been believing in us and voting for us. And first, we want to thank Jonathan Warrenson. Thank you, Jonathan, so much for supporting the show. We are LA Tech. You can find We Are LA Tech on Twitter at Get This. We Are LA Tech. Thank you for supporting the show. Also, Miriam, longtime supporter of the show, and we deeply appreciate your support. And Brandon Dayton, at Brandon Dayton, one of the co-creators of Sketchbook Summer. That was a fun time. Thank you, Brandon, for believing in us. And finally, the mysterious K. We don't know who you are. We don't know anything about you, but we appreciate the fact that you have showed up to support us. And if you want to support us too, you can check us out at patreon.com/leanintoart, where you can find all the shows that we produce, as well as the extra leans, the shows that we record just for people who support us on Patreon. And the latest episode, 111, was Creative Trouble Toolbox. That means, Rob, there's over 300 episodes of Lean Into Art in the can, and you can get them all at patreon.com/leanintoart, right?
That's totally right. And we deeply appreciate everyone's support.
Patreon.com/leanintoart. Easy enough. Easy enough. You know the name of the show.
Mm-hmm.
You know Patreon. Boom. Okay. Ready to go 10,000 feet up?
Yeah, let's think about this more.
Okay, well, let's do something a little bit looser, a little bit more mellow. See, the first music was like how Rob was when he was drinking caffeine on a regular basis. This is more like Rob's speed on the green tea.
Okay. Okay.
Upright bass. Rob, the upright bass on his way to work.
Yep. Doom, 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 doom. Oh, yeah. Just grooving along. What are we grooving into? This considering of...
Is this all just sunshine and rainbows and unicorns? You encounter a problem, you just think really, really hard, and then everything falls into place? Are there, exploring some of that emotional journey of that?
Survivor's bias.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I do not recall what I read, but it's someone kind of made an equivalence to some TED Talks in Survivor's bias, right? And it's like it can, like, your experience makes sense to you partially because of how you make sense of it, and it's a you could assign meaning to the flow of causality and stuff. But yeah, survivor's bias. If there was a TED talk about survivor's bias, what would happen? I don't know. It's
Yeah,
long walk
it,
for a
it
day.
would it would fold into itself.
It fold into itself. Whoop. Yep.
Now it's an
What?
11th dimensional micro object. Yeah, I mean that's. I think we should acknowledge that trap, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, so you've gone through you've gone through some bumps and bruises with you get something out, and maybe the sort of unforeseen constraints get you later, or maybe they get you as you're trying to get the project out, or maybe they kind of get you along the way because it's there's something impeding you toward reaching a finish line. And then what is your explanation of all that, saying how do you engage with it? How do you engage with that, Jersey? Like,
Hmm. Well, I try to mitigate that by running lots of experiments.
hmm,
And I know that, as we like to say in the show, no plan survives contact with the ground. I'm not necessarily protecting myself from failure, but I am trying to get as clear a sense of what I'm messing with ahead of time. Through we've talked about this a lot of times in the show in the past. When I was getting ready to do Boulder and Fleet as a mini comic, I ran a lot of experiments as to what kind of technology could I use, what kind of workflow would make sense, how can I optimize this to make it as efficient as possible, and how could I get the look that I want, right? All those different things, all those different trade-offs and balancing. Like, what's the because I would have loved to have been able to do it on a really lightweight, like even an Android device. I would have loved to make an Android device my like major main workstation, get it down that lean, but I couldn't get the look I wanted. Okay, can't do that, right? Boom, let's move on. And I didn't do that while I was working on the project. I did that ahead of time. But then I ran into, um, like so like talk about a failed one. There is an unfinished Captain Cat comic that I started on my Android devices. Just sitting on hard drives. I think I got like 6 pages done of it. It was only supposed to be like maybe 12 pages. So I'm like halfway done with the thing. It sits there still from years ago. And I actually really kind of like the story. It's something I would love to do, but it's just something where it's like, ooh, it was so painful working in that environment. I would have to start drawing it from scratch again if I wanted to do it now, right?
hmm.
Um, so yeah, there's been instances where it's like I start out with this kind of experimental feeling of, oh, let's see what I can do with these kinds of constraints, and then I like halfway through, I'm like, this isn't worth it. Now I'm just doing this for grit's sake and not doing it to make an interesting product or an interesting piece of art.
Super quick question
Yeah.
about that project. About what was it, Captain Cat or
Captain
Maggie?
Cat.
Or yeah, okay, Captain Cat. It's sort of locked away. Is that something that could become sort of a different stage asset when it, instead of totally redoing it, why wouldn't those become like the pencils or something?
I suppose so. Let me pull one up. I mean, I suppose
And
so.
this is 2 cents from bouncing it off a friend, right?
Right. I would have to look at the files again. And let me see. I'm opening up one right now. Oh, of course I open up a non-layered one. Here's one of the pages. Like,
Hmm.
um, the idea was I was trying to draw it entirely in Layer Paint HD, so it's an
Hmm.
MDP file. But that computer, that tablet, just with 2 gigs of RAM, and I don't know what kind of processor I had in it, just could not handle the multiple layers I wanted to work in. So that was one of the trade-offs. Let me see if I can pull up one of the layered files.
Okay.
Here we go, and I'll see if the pencils are there. Because yeah, you're right. If that's the case, here's one of the earlier pages too. Are the pencils there? Shut off all these layers. Well, I'll be doggone. Yeah, there are pencil
Well,
files here.
and I mean, even if couldn't the final work, if it's all flattened due to platform constraints and trade-off, I mean, technically there's something to base. You could treat that as pencils, tracing over your old work.
That's true.
Um, anyway, and just working through this as like a modeling exercise of saying like, well, shoot, um, maybe one way to re-engage with an old project is getting some reaction and feedback from someone in your brain trust, right?
Mm.
Because I mean that's actually why I'm revisiting making Guitar Fretter for more platforms instead of saying like, no, what I really need to do is Guitar Fretter 2 on the new thing that I'm not fully familiar with and whatever. And just you know, a friend was like, well, why don't you get that out there and whatever? And it's just just that little bit of additional question from a different perspective, and I'm like, I don't know, why not? Yeah, this is a good point. Um, so I know our question was about like, is this always, is it always a good outcome? Um, maybe.
Well, I have an instance where there's another one where I bit off more than I could chew, and it was mini comic day, and I want to say 5 years ago, and I actually said I'm gonna walk out of here with an 8-page mini comic, right? And which I did years later. I mean, like there's a mini comic I did called "Fish Don't Have Teeth." Some fish don't have teeth, I know, but I did do that at mini comic day. That's like the number one thing people like to say at my table when I'm tabling at conventions. Yes, I know. The title's "Fish Don't Have Teeth." Read the book. Read the book. Then we'll see what we think. But anyway, um, so the first year I tried to do this, I actually went in with 8.5 by 11 Bristol, and I'm like, I'm gonna pencil it, and I'm gonna ink it on 8.5 by 11 Bristol, and I'm gonna shrink it down to mini comic size, right?
Hmm.
Working that big turned out to be much more than I could handle in the 8 hours that we
Oh.
had. And also, I was trying to come up with a brand new concept out of nowhere. I put too many limitations on it. And I came up with this thing called RJ Rocket Arms, and it was going to be like this like crazy future robot story, where Captain RJ Rocket Arms leads like the space police force in the future, and it was going to be this silly, goofy thing. And it's one of those ones where I hit those walls, those friction walls, and then I put it in a drawer, and I go back and look at it now, and I'm like, this isn't that good. I don't want to resuscitate it. I'm glad I didn't finish it because it's not that good. The concept of a character
Uh,
named RJ Rocket Arms or Rocket Punch, I think is what the original one. RJ Rocket Punch. I'd still like that, and I'm still going to use it, but just not in its original implementation.
hmm.
So, so that's one where it did die.
And even then it didn't quite all the way. It's like that practice, that effort, some output has uh it's being used, it's being leveraged, it's going into something else, transformed, reshaped, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe there is something to so I don't know, something to I guess if this experience is laying around, if there's output from your experiences laying around, you can, like, the value you set to it is pretty flexible. You could be super precious about it and say like, no matter what, this thing's getting out in some form or the form I envisioned, and then I'm going to keep adapting tools. Or you could say that I need a break because I just need fresh perspective and time, and that time and distance, all of a sudden, like, I realized, wait a minute, like, this concept as it is in this form isn't really fit. I'm not really into it or whatever now. But then look at this, a character survives, right?
Yeah. Or a name or a concept. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like
Yes.
the idea of checking in with your brain trust, but I wonder if you have some other thoughts on ways to calibrate or triangulate, like when those frictions happen. Like, how do I know if this is worth keeping?
Well, let's see if it's worth keeping. And that's something that's changed for me over time. Like, I was planning on doing Underwater Tomato Ninja as it is, more or less, as like an app store game,
Mm,
and just as a demo, another way to get the name out there and stuff. And so Underwater Tomato Ninja is a sort of, it's a game that I released with the book, create a game construction kit, Underwater Tomato Ninja Edition. And it just, it's an open source project in its current form, but I thought, I'm going to put this on other platforms and sort of just, spread the word and be a good exercise and practice and stuff. And then I just sort of cooled on that project and thought, this isn't really representative of how I want to do games going forward, right? It's very much procedurally animated where the characters move along. It's a still image. So yeah, there's a little bit of things where you can make a still image, breathe a little bit with some code. You can make it wobble a little bit, or move in a way that gives it a little more feeling of this thing isn't just this stale dead picture I'm dragging across the screen, right? Anyway, but even then, it's not quite enough. I wanted to add, cell animation, stuff like that, and whatever. So um there's a lot of there's a lot of these things that I've tabled, but then all of a sudden I'm working on, Ninja versus Tomato King. So like that's one of the games I'm using to teach myself Unity. All right. So interesting shelving, maybe not of a project where it sort of generates as a new thing. But like when I'm looking at that, I think sometimes that I'm looking at myself as the mismatch of like maybe my expectations were just out of alignment. Like what kind of time do I have to put into this? And is this am I trying to build a thing that's well suited toward my available resources and or habits, right? And so I think there's a sort of me as I'm an important aspect of my toolbox, right? But then platform mismatches happen. And then sort of what do you do, right? And because like you mentioned, you didn't say like future proofing. You said something like you don't expect to be able to protect yourself from
like unforeseen complications of making the thing. Right, I'm not trying to make a bulletproof vest by doing experiments. The experimentation is to manage risk and to get. I don't know how it is for you, Rob, but for me with my creative endeavors, I think of this example that I once heard my teaching friend Mary Jo once say, is that you go to see the movie, you go see Harry Potter, and you go, that's not who should have played Ron Weasley. And the friend says, well, who should have? I don't know, but not him. You got a picture in your head. You have a clear picture in your head, but you can't see it. I mean, your brain's got to figure it out, but you can't conjure that visual. And I feel like that's how creative projects start for me a lot of the times. Like I have this feeling, I have this gut reaction, like it's gonna feel something like this. I can't clearly speak to it. I can't describe it very accurately. And the experimentation becomes a way of me finding the language. That's part of it too. So it's not just about diminishing risk. It's also about me like sort of like forging the image for myself. But yeah, I know that I'm gonna hit weird little parts in the process where in the making the thing where it's either the tools aren't doing what I want them to, or rather I'm not. My interaction with the tools isn't netting the results that I'd hoped to. Or the platform changes, right?
Yeah.
Or rules can change. For instance, like yeah.
No, and that can happen for a lot of reasons. It's very natural. You can think like, well, I loved this version of an app, but now they updated it, and my old one doesn't run anymore, or whatever. And then and now what? Because I don't really like the choices they made, or the company goes out of business, or the particular model of pencil you love is no longer being sold, and all that
You're
stuff.
hitting me at a pain point.
It can happen
Yeah.
for totally natural reasons. It can seem pretty personal and frustrating, but like here you are now. It's your problem regardless, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, I even had it happen with paper, right? Like there was a brand of Bristol that I adored for many years, and all of a sudden I started buying batches of it, and like half of it had like it would the fibers would like kind of fray up when I was working on 'em. Or crow quills. Like I was a big lover of crow quills for a long time, but I noticed that sometimes the quality of construction would be a little shoddy. Or let me see, I'm using strong language. I mean, the quality would not be consistent, and some batches would not be awesome, and some batches would be super awesome. So it's like, yeah, you're really at the mercy of some of the things, like the some
No, the
rather,
bigger ecosystem,
yeah, which can
because
seem
that
for, yeah,
it's like some little weird change like halfway across the planet where someone used one supplier to get the metal for the crowquill nibs and then
yeah,
was like, well, we got a better deal from this other one, or oh, that one went out of business, and now they're in the situation of like, well, shoot, I had this reliable source and now what do I do? And then they make a change and it has these rippling effects, right?
yeah,
So but here we are and we experience it, in our place in the ecosystem.
right. Um, Killer Maddie in the chat is actually asking, how do you decide when to give up on a project or power through? We've been kind of dancing around that a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm wondering if we could make that our final thought today. Um, but
It's a good
it's
one.
like going back to the RJ Rocket Punch thing I was talking about. That was a situation where it's like I was like, let me put it in a drawer. Just need to step away from it, give myself a little breathing space, then I'll come back to it. And then I came back and I was like, no, 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 that's ugly, baby. I don't want that one. So, sometimes it's that, but I'm sure there's some other, you know, decision making strategies that we've used in the past. Um, how do we know when it's like, should, nope, this one's not happening versus, no, this one needs to happen? Or maybe I just need to power through and just, see it through to the end, right? Talk a lot about
I,
frictions. How do we get to the
yeah,
end, right?
let's talk about our some ways that we think about that as our final thoughts.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, we will talk about that in about a minute. But before we do that, we got to thank a few other people who make the show possible, and those people happen to be us because we make the show. But we also make other kinds of stuff, which feeds all of our ideas that we explore on the show. And the first thing I would like you to check out of mine is a comic called Boulder and Fleet. I've been mentioning it a couple times in the show today. What is it? It's about two best friends who try to go into business as adventurers for hire, which means we're going to get in adventures, which means we're going to find ourselves in danger, which means, my partner's a pacifist. How do we solve problems with dangerous people when one of the characters doesn't like to fight? And as you can see, it's got cute animals in people clothes and crazy bug monsters in armor. A combination of action, adventure, and cuteness, and it's at boulderandfleet.com. And there is a Patreon where you can see a lot of my in-progress work at patreon.com/Jersey. Rob, you make a game.
I do. And this one is called This Panda Needs You. And what this game is all about is it's a pattern matching, problem solving puzzle game where you deal with shapes and physics. You've got the colors of the shapes also, and a panda is just walking along through a nice little bamboo field or bamboo forest, and sees a stack of blocks, and well, here they are as they should be. Then a cloud comes along, knocks them all down, and you're here to help the panda put it all right. And it starts out really easy, gets a lot more challenging as you go on. There's over 50 levels, and it works on your iPhone and iPad, and hopefully soon more platforms. But right now, you can get it at the iTunes App Store. Search for This Panda Needs You, or go to this-panda.com for an easy link.
And if you're here because, after all, you like the way we think about stuff, and yeah, it's nice that we make stuff too, but this is really what you're here for, is the Lean Into Artcast. Fair enough, because that's another thing that we make. This is a thing that we make in addition to all the other stuff that we make. And you can get more of that kind of stuff at leanintoart.com/workshops. If you haven't checked it out yet, there are self-contained workshops, videos there, workshop video series in some cases, where I explore all sorts of deep and nerdy places about comic book construction. And Rob explores deep and nerdy places about UI design and making video games. We've been talking about video games a lot today, and even turning jokes into comics. Laughing Getty, Monkey Spaghetti. All available at leanintoart.com/workshops at a price of your choosing, even zero. You can just download them, and if you get a lot of value out of them, you can always go back and purchase them. Can I consider that giving us a tip? Or, if you've done all that stuff, if you've interacted with our comics, downloaded Rob's games. By the way, if you download any of Rob's games, give him a star rating. That is really useful to help more people find the game. And that leads me to this point about the show. If you're watching the video right now on YouTube, giving it a thumbs up helps more people discover the show. If you listen to the podcast, Giving it a star review on podcatcher of your choice. 5-star review helps more people find the show, raises our rankings in search. And we thank everybody who has been doing those things. I got one more thing I want to jam into this, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
The cover for Science Comics Rockets was revealed on Entertainment Weekly this week.
So cool.
So
Congratulations. This is so awesome, man. Looks
thanks.
beautiful.
It's pretty cool. So I'm going to be making a lot more noise about this in the weeks to come. But yes, First Second is producing this science comic series, and I and my wife Anne were lucky enough to get a chance to contribute a book about one of our favorite subjects, which is rockets and rocket history. And so it's the log line for it is Carl Sagan's Cosmos as hosted by Grumpy Animals in the style or the pacing of Larry Gonick's Cartoon History of the Universe. So it's fast paced. You'll learn about physics and how rockets work, but you'll also learn a lot about animals and rocket history. So that comes out next June of 2018. But it's pretty cool to see our cover on there on Entertainment Weekly. Anyway,
That's awesome. And so this is it's a good time to get in on the ground floor and help spread the excitement on this on a really cool project.
I'm going to be launching something very soon. Ann and I are putting something together to sort of like build up some sort of like build an on ramp to the release of the book, and we're going to be making some neat giveaways and things. So TBD, we'll be announcing it on the Lead into Artcast in the weeks to come. And thanks, Killer Maddie in the chat for the congratulations. Yeah, we're really excited about the book. It was a lot of really hard work, but now comes the really cool part where the book comes out and I get to watch people interact with it. Final thought time, Rob.
Mhm. So this is definitely big enough to be a whole episode, right? And something that we have explored multiple times, the whole idea of what kind of projects do you end up, going further with, or versus pausing, what have you. And so, like, how do you decide whether you pause or abandon or push onward with a project? And I'm assuming in the context of um, some kind of challenge or twist pops up.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you decide, Jersey?
You're working on the thing, um, and you have been this close to it, right? It's right in front of your face for months and months and months.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get into that kind of space, you lose perspective. Is this good? I don't know. You know, or it's a time drain. It takes, let's say, 5 hours a week when you're already working 40 hours a week, plus family and friends. Maybe you have children. That 5 hours a week can become a substantial pot of energy to maintain and nurture, and that can drain on you. Like, oh, I got to do that thing again. Why am I doing this again? Right? Or you've been putting a lot of years into it. Like I've been doing this thing for 3 years, and you hear people say like, "Wow, it took me 2 years to build up my 10,000 fans," and then you're like, "Well, I've been doing this for 5. Why haven't I gotten that?" Right? Is it worth it? There's a lot of signals can go on to make you doubt and wonder what the thing is, and rightly so, because like you should be evaluating those signals to help you calibrate and tweak and refine and uh, update your perception and what you're trying to do and what the work looks like, right? That's
Totally.
reasonable. Um, but something you said earlier that I think is really useful. This goes back to the Boulder and Fleet thing that I was showing you guys. I was showing the page that I was showing. I was specifically chose because it's one of the earliest pages of the comic, and I know I've told the story a bunch of times, but it was just a little fun experiment that I did. Made it a mini comic, took it to Comic Cons, and I knew it was good. I didn't really like. It wasn't like my thing. It was like this is the thing that I want to, invest the next couple of years of my life into. But I got signals from my brain trust, people who I really valued their opinion and their perspective and their worldview and their taste, really reacted to it. And like it sold well at cons compared to my other books too. But what was more important to me was that like people whose taste I really, really valued responded very positively. I'm like, okay, I need to look at this again. Um, and then also, those are the same people I went to when I hit the hard points in making the long Boulder and Fleet story, which took like a year and a half to make, called Mining for Trouble. Rob, you're part of this group. I have a small group of people the it literally is called like a circle of trust that I keep on Facebook. And like when I'm really stuck, I'll post an image, I'll post a thing, and I'll be like, okay, am I crazy? Or is there something wrong with this? Or is there something right with this? I just need somebody to react to this, right? Um, because not always getting a huge reaction from the general public. So sometimes you have to go to your brain trust. That's like my first big one is if you can find or nurture a brain trust, even if it starts out with just like the people who are closest to you in your life. Like my little brother, who's not an artist, he's a musician, right? Well, he's an artist, but he's not a visual artist. He's a musician. Like he would be somebody that I would turn to and be like, okay, you know what I'm trying to do. You have a good sense of taste. Or my wife, right? People who are you could start there and sort of build out. Um, That'd be one that I would use. What else would you layer on that, Rob?
I don't have a lot to layer on it, but maybe I don't know, highlight things
Okay.
that
I said a lot of
totally
words.
don't, but through a biased lens. No, like I think it's crystal clear. It makes sense that the kind of signals that you're looking for, and how I end up mapping that is through the like human centered design circles of, well, you're looking for the desirability, the feasibility, and the viability. And this is a project I'm doing for some intention, right? And am I getting signals in these three different buckets toward being able to bring about an outcome I'm seeking for based on that intention. So it's and so for you, there's different places where you can get the some signals on the sort of the desirability. Talking to your brain trust is huge for that. Some of your brain trust may have some expertise in the market and stuff too, where it's like, okay, they have some hint at viability, right? But then again, viability, seeing people actually buy something that's representative or related to the project you're working on, that's great evidence. That's a huge signal. That's like observable evidence, real world behavior, money happened, engaging in trade for that thing. Huge data, huge signal. And then you have the whole like, well, the feasibility aspect of like, can I produce this, and is it working and whatnot. So all that stuff is what I would think about as far as pausing or abandoning or pushing on. Am I ready in all three of those? Am I ready in two of those? And like, how do I feel about that? And so it's really that's your call. Where if you're seeing a gap of like, well, I guess I'm not ready in this way or that way, how do you go about changing that, and how do you feel about that?
I what I love about what you're describing is it's a very different mindset than powering through. Powering through has this sort of like bull kind of feeling, like I'm charging and I may be fatigued, I may have a bunch of like pikes sticking out of my back, but I'm pushing, right? Whereas you're talking about more of leveraging. It's like, whoa, I push there and nothing really happens. Well, what if I push here, right? Much more
Yeah,
like judo.
yeah, pushing with that intention and perspective.
Mhm.
So if you if you feel confident enough after it's trying to get a little bit of perspective beyond your love for your project. If that's gone, maybe you need a break, right? Or maybe you need to push through if it's like, well, you made a big commitment, and you've got good signal, it looks feasible, viable, and desirable.
Okay, let's put those three words again and like give them a little bit more of a concrete.
Feasible building,
Feasible means
right?
what?
Feasible, can you build it? Are you good at building it, the way you're trying to build it, right? Feasible. Viable, money, right? Is it financially going to work out, however you're going to engage in trade with that, right? That is viable. Desirable, that's the human aspect, right? Where it's like, okay, people have shown love, interest, um usage, engagement, connection, reaction, something, right? And especially if that's coming from like trusted sources. A second, like, so you have your brain trust as far as like the collaborator level. I think the other level, or different level, would be like a trusted uh top fans, or people who
Yep.
are consuming your stuff.
Yep.
At your patrons, for instance, can
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
big
And
influence on your project.
I have come to rely on them a lot. So the people who support me on Patreon, and it's not like I've got thousands of them. It's like it's a small group, but they're very they very much believe in what I'm doing. So it's super valuable to me to go to them and say like, okay, here's 10 things that I'm thinking about, 10 different designs. What's speaking to you guys? And then I get really good feedback from them. Um, and who better to give me feedback than the people who like what I do enough to financially support it?
Totally. It's like if you don't have that feedback and then just people reacting with when they where they don't have much investment, that's that's a signal too, but I wouldn't weight that one as heavy as
Yep.
someone who's actually investing and
Agreed. And I will say,
involved.
to back up Rob's point, I've come to use that Facebook group a lot less ever since I started running the Patreon.
Mm,
It's like, because yeah, their signal, it means a lot more to the growth of the book as far as I'm concerned. I like getting the positive feedback from my friends, but getting the feedback from people who are financially backing the thing is a lot stronger and clearer and more informative signal.
absolutely. And it's so relevant because they care and it matters to them. And that's really valuable. So then, it is it, but there's nothing predefined with all this. Like whatever data you end up getting from those perspectives will hopefully help make it easier for you to make a decision, but it doesn't make the decision
Yep.
because you could just totally ignore that and do it anyway.
That's true. Oh, and we laugh because we've both been there.
Yep.
We've both been climbing into that X-wing on Dagobah while a bunch of smart people are saying, "No, don't do that. That's a bad idea." And we're like, "No, I got a vision."
Exactly.
All right. Well,
Nothing.
I
All
think
right.
we did a thing.
I think so too. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Rob, for this discussion, and thanks everybody in the
Thank you.
chat who's been watching live for participating, and thanks for everybody who downloads, watches, and listens. And the show will be archived at patreon.com/leanintoart. We record every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. You can participate live at leanintoart.com/live. Or you can just watch it on YouTube after the fact or download the podcast after the fact. Any way you like it. And until next time, I have been Jersey Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jersey on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye. Oh, okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
Okay, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.